Okay, this is supposed to say, oh, sorry. All right, let's try this again. This is supposed to say chapter 5. I don't know what happened to this packet, but apparently it didn't print right. But this is the new chapter 5 packet that we are starting today in class. You can find this on Google Classroom. I suggest printing it out so you can follow along as I do the video, but again, it's optional. So this is our new review set, and I'm not going to go through every single question in detail because again, it is review, but I will go over some of them. So for number 1, it says find the distance. That would be plugging this into the distance formula, which it's x2 minus x1, so 3 minus 9, and then y2 minus y1, which is -1 minus 2. And when you put that in your calculator, you get 6.7. The second one is using slope. And if you plug this one into the slope formula, it's y2 minus y1, so -5 minus 0, over x2 minus x1, which would be -3 minus 2. That would give you -5 over -5, which reduces down to 1. So there's the answer for number 2. Number 3 is double distribution. So 3x times x is 3x squared. 3x times 1 is 3x. -5 times x is -5x. And -5 times 1 is -5. Put your x's together, and your final answer is going to be 3x squared minus 2x minus 5. And then the last one, before I can graph it, I need to put this in y equals mx plus b. So I would start by subtracting 2x from both sides. So that would give me 3y equals -2x plus 6. You can't combine 6 and 2x. They're not like terms. And then you divide everything by 3. So that's going to be -2/3 x plus 2 when you simplify it. Now when I graph it, my starting point's 2, and it always goes on the y-axis. And my slope is -2 over 3, so I'm going to go down 2, and then you always go to the right. So down 2 to the right 3. Up 2 to the left 3, so I can fit more points. And there is my line. So the quiz on this quiz is Monday, and most of you will be back on Monday, I believe. So you will be taking this quiz with us. I will have these formulas up on the board. There should be no problems with you taking the quiz. It's all review, and if you need help, please email me. I can help you before Monday comes along, but right now you are taking this quiz on Monday with everybody else. Okay, so I'm going to go to page 2, which is going to be the start of the new chapter. Now, this chapter I would say is easier than last chapter. The only thing that makes it hard is we have a lot of vocab, and if you don't know the vocab, then you can't solve the questions. So that's why I suggest maybe putting the vocab on your half sheets when the time comes. But today we're going to go over 4 vocabulary terms. The first one is median. Median starts at a vertex and cuts the other side of the triangle in half. So, what I mean by that, WY is the median. When it says it starts at a vertex, that means it starts at one of the 3 angles. So in this case, it starts at W, has to start at 1 of 3 points. So this starts at W, and then when it hits the other side, YZ, it cuts it into 2 equal parts. So that's why it says XY is congruent to YZ. So that's a median. So I'm going to use that information to answer these 4 questions down here. So in number 1, it says find AB if DB equals 14.1. So again, we have a median because it's labeled for us. It says this is a median. And so it wants us to find the length of the entire thing, but I know DB is 14.1. Well, since the median cuts this in half, this side is also 14.1. So the length of the entire thing would be 28.2. And that's my answer for the first one. The second one, it says find AD if AB, which is the whole thing, is 40.8. Well, if the whole thing's 40.8, and I want to find one of these sides, they're cut in half, so I'm just going to do 40.8, divide that by 2, and you get 20.4. So that would be the length of AD. The next one, find FE, that's the whole thing, if TE equals 8. Well, again, this is a median, so that means this side would also be 8, so the whole thing would be 16. And then the last one, GF, is what I'm trying to find, but I'm given TF is 6.3. So again, this other side is 6.3, so the whole thing would be 12.6. So that's what you know for a median, is that it's going to cut the other side into 2 equal parts. The next vocab term is angle bisector. This is probably the easiest one out of all of them today, and it cuts an angle in half. So for these two examples at the bottom, the line in the middle, that's your angle bisector. So it's cutting this into 2 equal parts. So right here it says find the value of x, and this is labeled as 5x minus 2, and this is labeled as 4x plus 5. And again, that is cutting that in half. So to find x, since I know these are cut into 2 equal parts, I'm going to set these equal to each other and solve. So 5x minus 2 equals 4x plus 5. And I'm going to go ahead and solve that for x. So that'll give me 1x minus 2 equals 5. Add 2 to both sides, and you're going to get x equals 7. And that's all it's asking for, so this one is done. The next one, angle bisector, cuts it in half. That's why these have markings on it, and those are 2 equal parts. Now, one other thing you should know is that sometimes they put the angle up farther in your, how should I describe it? So this whole thing is the angle, and sometimes they make the markings up further. Those are still equal to each other. So it doesn't matter if they're back here or up farther. When it comes to an angle bisector, you're still going to set these equal to each other and solve for x. So if I subtract 4x on both sides, I get 3 equals 4x minus 9. Add 9, and I get 12 equals 4x. Divide by 4, x is going to be 3. So that's the answer to the second one. So a median is just a line that cuts the other side of the triangle in half. An angle bisector actually cuts an angle in half. So you're going to have just an angle as the diagram, and it's going to be split into 2 equal parts. So page 3, this is the last page we're doing today. We have 2 more vocab terms. So perpendicular bisector cuts a side of a triangle in half. Okay, so that's part of the definition. It's going to cut a side in half again, just like a median, but it's perpendicular this time. Perpendicular means 90 degrees. So it's going to cut a side of a triangle in half at 90 degrees. So up here in this diagram, AB is a perpendicular bisector, and it cuts the side FG into 2 equal parts, and there's that right angle showing that it's hitting it at 90 degrees. Another thing you should know, when you have a perpendicular bisector, you could also say the 2 sides of the triangles are the same. So FA would equal GA. So with that information, answering these 3 questions down here. So WZ is a perpendicular bisector, AD is a perpendicular bisector, and RS is a perpendicular bisector. So we have bisectors here. And this first one says, what is the length of YW? Well, since we have a perpendicular bisector, the 2 sides are the same. So this would also be 7.3. In my second one, it wants the length of BC. That would be the base of the triangle. Now, the bisector cuts that side in half, so this side would also be 16. So that means the whole thing would be 32 of BC. The last one, find the length of PR. Well, first I have to find N. Now, since it's a perpendicular bisector, I know the two sides are going to be equal to each other. So I'm going to do 2n plus 9 equals 7n minus 18. And when you solve for x, I think you're going to get a decimal. So you're going to get 27 equals 5n, divide 5 on both sides, and we're going to get 5.4. So I found n, but now I need to go back and actually find what the length of PR is, because it says what is PR. So PR is represented by 2n plus 9, so I'm going to plug 5.4 into n. So 2 times 5.4 plus 9 is 19.8. So that is the length of PR. So that's perpendicular bisector. Cuts the side in half, but at 90 degrees, and it also makes the two sides of the triangle the same length. The last one, altitude. Starts at a vertex, again. So that means it starts at an angle and hits the other side at 90 degrees. So it starts at an angle again, and it hits the other side at 90 degrees. So you notice that nowhere in this definition did I mention it cuts anything in half. So this is the only time you're not going to set anything equal to each other. So they show you 3 different types of altitudes. The first one is in an acute triangle. This would be the altitude, because it starts at an angle and hits the other side at 90 degrees. In a right triangle, the altitude would actually be one of your 3 sides. And in an obtuse triangle, the altitude would be outside your triangle. So, again, an altitude starts at one of your angles and hits the other side at 90 degrees. That's it. There's no equal to, there's no cut in half. That's all there is. So in this very last example, it says find x, CD, and AB, or I'm sorry, CD and DB, if AD is an altitude. So it tells us AD is an altitude. And first I gotta solve for x. Well, I'm not gonna set these equal to each other because an altitude does not cut anything in half. So I have to do something with this 4x minus 6. Well, this is pointing to this angle right here. Well, I know from the definition that angle has to be 90 degrees. So I'm gonna set up 4x minus 6 equals 90, and then solve for x. So if you add 6 and divide by 4, you're gonna get x equals 24. So there's a part of my answer, but I'm not done because it also says find the length of CD and DB. So CD is x plus 7, so I'm gonna plug in 24. 24 plus 7 gives me 31. And then it also says find the length from D to B. So I'm gonna plug in 24 again. 2 times 24 minus 15, which will give me 33. And again, those are not gonna be the same length because the altitude does not cut it in half. So there's the last one. So that's all we did today in class. Tomorrow we'll start with the second review set on page 4. But for right now, you just gotta make sure you know those 4 definitions. And if you know the 4 definitions, then you'll know how to solve the different questions. So please let me know if you need help.